We are back with another team selection video, this time ahead of double game week 23, and this will be a double upload today. Let me know your thoughts in terms of what you're planning to do ahead of this double game week, and what are your plans for the blank/double game week in 25, not to mention everything else in between and after these crucial blank/doubles coming up. So if you end up enjoying this video, be sure to drop it a like. We're trying to get this to over 300, and we're also looking to push on towards 18,000 subscribers. I'm going to be talking about my Game Week 22 performance, how I did after the Man United Leeds game overnight, before delving into my transfer plans and the team selection for double Game Week 23. Things got to an incredible start with the Chelsea vs Fulham game. Kepa Arrizabalaga kept a clean sheet, got maximum bonus points, and another top performance by him to accumulate another double-digit return, and he's got the most points of any goalkeeper since the World Cup with 44. He is the go-to goalkeeper right now, and whilst there are some other good alternatives like Raya and Pope, they blank in Game Week 25, thus making Kepa the very best right now, and by some considerable margin. And despite the likes of Everton, Wolves, Arsenal having doubles in 25, not to mention Liverpool, I still think Kepa is the right goalkeeper to pick. He's so cheap, he has such a high ceiling, and whenever Chelsea get a narrow win or keep a clean sheet, he has a really good chance of getting 8, 9 or even 10 points. Despite returning in the first game of a double game week, there is a sensation that Luke Shaw could have produced so much more, because he was on for a potentially 9 points. I think at one stage he was actually on 11 points, the same as Bruno Fernandes and Rashford, but Casemiro got sent off in a moment of madness, and all of a sudden Crystal Palace score a late goal, and whilst there was only a consolation, that was enough to wipe out Luke Shaw's clean sheet, and Casemiro was then suspended for the next 3 Premier League games, which included their second game of the double game week against Leeds. And Man United, I think, lacked control in that midfield and that anchor that could really protect the defence. They conceded twice in that game, so in the end Luke Shaw owners had to just suffice with a 6-pointer, which is the equivalent of a clean sheet basically. But I firmly believe if Casemiro didn't get sent off in that moment, United would have had at least 1 clean sheet in the double, most likely against Palace, and they would have been a bit more solid in the second game against Leeds. So I think that was a crucial moment, and in the end, Shaw didn't get that double-digit return. So those of you that maybe captain him or even triple captain him, I do feel for you in a way. But for me, the kind of preference was always in the attackers, and United, despite their improvements defensively since the restart, they still have these moments sometimes where they just concede these unnecessary goals, make some errors, and that's why I just couldn't bring myself to captain Shaw. But I still think it was a good pick, but Rashford and Bruno Fernandes, of course, were the clear standouts for me. The next 2 defenders, very disappointing stuff. Ben White with a 2-pointer. Whenever I start him, he tends to just blank really, but when he's on my bench, he gets 6, 7 or even 8 points. And Arsenal didn't deserve anything on the day, despite creating some half chances, including a goal line clearance from a Bukayo Saka volley. And look, I still like Arsenal defenders in the long term, but if you're looking at game weeks such as game week 23 and 25, you could argue that a triple up in the attack is actually the most optimal and has the highest ceiling, with Nketiah, Odegaard and Saka being the preferred trio. However, going forwards beyond until the end of the season potentially, I would still recommend an Arsenal defender and then 2 midfielders arguably in Odegaard and Bukayo Saka. The final defender, and this kind of sums up maybe the defender returns this week, Kieran Trippier blanking is a rare sight. It's the first time in a few months, let's just put it that way. West Ham were able to come back after a strong start by Newcastle. Trippier remains the best defender in the game, but because he blanks in 25, there are some people selling him, whether it's now or heading into that period, and I do understand that, but I just can't bring myself to sell him in Game Week 23 or 24, and even in 25, I'm prepared to just bench him and then put him back into my starting 11 for all the game weeks afterwards, assuming that Newcastle have no more blanks later in the season. It was all about the Man United players in Game Week 22, in particular the likes of Rashford and Bruno Fernandes. Marcus Rashford accumulated 2 goals and an assist throughout both games, and he continues his incredible record at Old Trafford, and that's now 6 successive Premier League games that he scored in home matches, and that is the first time a United player has done that since Wayne Rooney in 2012. Rashford is in the form of his life, he can't stop scoring, and he was the catalyst for that Manchester United comeback after being 2-0 down to Leeds United, who just sacked Jesse Marsh. So it was good to see Rashford, just continuing his fine form and accumulating even more points for all of us. And of course, he's owned by so many players, and the only way you really would have gained something from his points is if you had triple captained him. And the same goes for another Bruno Fernandes. He was more of a differential, so to speak. So even just by captaining him, they would have produced some huge returns. And he was the one who scored the first goal in the double game week against Crystal Palace with a penalty won by Marcus Rashford. But ultimately, Bruno Fernandes wasn't able to quite keep up with Rashford, and I still think he was a really good captaincy option, and he has a great record against Leeds. I can completely understand why people went that way, and I was actually genuinely considering it, especially as a differential sort of captain. But looking at Rashford's form, I just couldn't personally go with anyone else in terms of triple captaincy or even the captaincy in Gameweek 22. But I was rather surprised, because I was even saying this in the deadline stream. Whoever takes the penalties, that could be the deciding factor between Rashford and Bruno Fernandes. Bruno took the penalty, but didn't really build on from that with anything else. He got maximum bonus points in the first game, but in the second game, I have to say, he had a pretty poor performance against Leeds, which I certainly wasn't expecting, and maybe he was missing the likes of Eriksen and Casemiro just behind him. But of course, there's so many things that we could consider when making our FPL decisions. You also don't want to just tread into the overthinking territory. The other midfielders, though, much more disappointing in this way. Martin Odegaard, another one of my new signings, blanking. He had a great record against Everton, scoring in both games last season, but he actually was arguably at fault for the goal. He was marking Tarkowski, and to be fair, I just blame whoever put Odegaard in charge of that, because why is Odegaard marking Tarkowski? That would be my biggest question. He had an underwhelming performance. He was pretty poor, to be quite frank, and you could say the same about every single Arsenal player. The only one that I think played pretty well, arguably an 8 out of 10 or something like that, would have been Gabriel at the back. Everyone else was pretty subpar or mediocre even. I think Saka was the most lively from the attackers. He even came close to scoring, but the others like Odegaard, Nketiah, Martinelli, very, very ineffective and very wasteful as well. And speaking of Martinelli, he was subbed off just before the 60th minute mark, and that is obviously a cause for concern, and more people are selling him now despite having a double game week. And I'm just hoping that during this double he starts both games and plays 60 plus minutes, and I think if he does that, he has a good chance of a return or two against Brentford and Man City. But that's going to be the big issue: minutes. Is he going to start games? Will Trossard take a start off him? And if so, is it going to be against Brentford, which is going to be the more plum fixture of the two? So there's a lot of question marks surrounding him. He could also be subbed off quite early, like he was in Gameweek 22. But despite all of that, I am confident Martinelli will start both games in the double and also produce some returns. But of course, that might be some wishful thinking. And certainly, if I were to buy an Arsenal midfielder or attacker this week, Martinelli would be lower down the pecking order, with Saka, Odegaard and Nketiah being ahead in that list. Usually the front three have been very reliable for me, producing multiple returns, but it was only Harry Kane this time producing something with a goal, that winner against Man City, 2 bonus points and another record for him in terms of goal scoring. But other than that, it was very, very lackluster. Even the likes of Erling Haaland blanking, being very ineffective. That's the first time in a Premier League match that Haaland has failed to register a single shot. He was kept very quiet, and he was making some good runs and getting into some good positions, but he wasn't really found by his teammates. And that was, an issue against Man United just a few weeks ago as well. And that could be a problem in the other big games too. So we're all going to have our eyes focused on that Man City Arsenal game, which will be crucial for the title race. If Man City can't find Haaland in these key areas, then they will be in trouble, because Haaland can just unlock any defence with finishing in all areas of the pitch, in particular in the box. But if they can't find him, it's just going to be very difficult to get him involved in the game. He doesn't need that many touches, of course, but if he isn't even having a single touch in the opposition's box, it's going to be very difficult for him to really make an impact in these big games. The final forward, and probably the most disappointing for me, is Ivan Toney, with successive 1-pointers, 2 yellow cards in a row, and I was expecting him to return at least once in the last 2 game weeks, and he now faces Arsenal away in 23 and blanks in Game Week 25. So a lot of people will either bench him or sell him right now for Eddie Nketiah, Darwin Núñez, Harry Kane, or another forward, and that completely makes sense. But what I might do is just bench him in 23 and 25, start him in 24, and also all the other fixtures after the next upcoming blank/double game week that we obviously discussed in 25. Check out my best wildcard team video for an overview of that. Now let me show you my ranks, my triple captaincy, which I played in Game Week 22 before moving on to my team selection ahead of double Game Week 23. There were a few standouts like Kepa Arrizabalaga and Bruno Fernandes, but the MVP this week was certainly Marcus Rashford. Triple captaining him gave me 60 of my 106 points overall, so he was the difference maker, and that has allowed me to go up in rank yet again to around 78,000 in the world. And just for context, I was around 1.3 million before the World Cup. But those are my overall points, and let me know how you did in the comment section down below. Now let's discuss my Gameweek 23 team selection and the proposed transfer I'm looking to make. I'm also open to maybe taking a -4 hit, but that is less likely, and of course we'll discuss this as well in Saturday's deadline stream, so be sure to tune in for that as well. With 19 points in his last 2 games, there's no one else to start rather than Kepa Arrizabalaga, despite being away to West Ham, who have shown some improvements, especially in recent weeks, with 2 wins and a draw, including one away to Newcastle. But you would still not be too surprised if Chelsea were able to keep a clean sheet in that London derby, and if they do, Kepa has a great chance of getting more than just 6 points with saves and bonus points. If I decide to go with just one free transfer, I will go for a back 4 this week, which includes double game weeker Ben White with 2 home fixtures against Brentford and Man City. There could be a clean sheet there for Arsenal, but the majority of their clean sheets come away from home. They're a bit more expansive in home games. They're very high pressing, high energy from the get-go, and that does leave some spaces in behind. So I'm not that confident of a clean sheet, but either way, I'm not going to bench a double game weeker like Ben White, even though that double does include Man City, their title rivals. Next up is Luke Shaw away to Leeds, and if I were to take a -4 hit, maybe get a Man City defender like Ake, then that player would come in for Luke Shaw. And if Man United and Leeds kind of pans out the same way as it did at Old Trafford, then you wouldn't really expect Man United to keep a clean sheet. It could be another high-scoring game, and whilst United are still going to be favourites to win that, you still wouldn't be too convinced about a clean sheet or any points there for Luke Shaw. And then I'm going to go for a double-up in Newcastle defence with Botman away to Bournemouth, not to mention Kieran Trippier, and I'm very, very confident of a clean sheet there for Newcastle, despite their blip against West Ham and a lot of draws recently over the last month. But I'm still very confident in this back 4. You would argue you could see a clean sheet for Newcastle, maybe one for Arsenal across this back line, and if anything else were to happen like an assist or some bonus points, then that will just be even more welcome and add to a very nice points tally. Arsenal midfielders have been very disappointing of late. Well, it just depends really on which ones you have. But Martin Odegaard has this double. He's a great captaincy option, of course. And with these 2 home games, you would expect him to thrive. There is one midfielder that I'm a bit fearful of not going with, and that will be Bukayo Saka, as I do have Martin Odegaard, Ben White, and a third Arsenal asset in Gabriel Martinelli, who I'm probably prepared to keep, and I could take him out for a -4 hit, or even just focus my single transfer on Martinelli to Saka. But I think there is a better move for me, considering double Gameweek 23 as well as Gameweek 25, and I think that is why I'm probably going to be looking to do Bruno Fernandes out to Riyad Mahrez. And the plan was always to have Bruno Fernandes for 1 week, and then if he played extremely well and kind of changed my mind, then I would have been open to keeping him. And whilst I am still considering that possibility, I think I will just get rid of Bruno Fernandes to Mahrez. That is the best transfer for me long term. Now, the biggest issue with that move is Riyad Mahrez and rotation, with the Champions League fast approaching for Man City. They won't be playing next week, but the week afterwards, and of course that could impact Gameweek 24 and Gameweek 25 as a result. But with a home fixture against Aston Villa and an away one to Arsenal, I think the likes of Mahrez and Kevin De Bruyne can do really well, and I do back Man City's attackers more so than the defence. And if I had to pick one midfielder right now, it would be Riyad Mahrez. But I'm still considering De Bruyne or even keeping Bruno Fernandes. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. What do you think is the best option in regards to those 3 players? The last midfielder, though, will be the in-form Marcus Rashford, who has been exceptional this season. And even though he's got a solitary fixture away to Leeds, I still think he can add to his goal tally with his incredible form and add another haul to his fine collection. So this is a really solid midfield 4 with 3 double game weekers. We've got Ben White at the back as well. And then finally, let's complete the team with the 2 forwards. I said earlier in this video that I will bench Ivan Toney, so that just leaves Harry Kane and the double game week player that we're all going to captain, Erling Haaland. I don't think we definitely have to go for Erling Haaland as the captain. We could even consider Riyad Mahrez, Kevin De Bruyne, Martinelli, Odegaard and Bukayo Saka, but I think Haaland is still the best option in the game. And with that home fixture against Aston Villa, who have been poor defensively, especially in their last game against Leicester, I think Haaland can score 2 or 3 goals alone in that fixture. So if you do have the triple captaincy still, and you're very unsure about future doubles and blanks because you might want to use other chips, especially in the major double game weeks, then I would consider using the triple captaincy now. If I didn't use the triple captaincy on Marcus Rashford in Game Week 22, then I probably would have done so on Erling Haaland in Game Week 23. But of course, I encourage you to leave your thoughts down in the comment section below in terms of that and the captaincy in general. Who are you going to go for? But my initial thoughts are to go with Erling Haaland. So now let's discuss my bench as well as the captaincy and who I've put the vice captaincy armband on. I've currently got the armband on Erling Haaland, but I am considering the likes of Odegaard and Riyad Mahrez in particular to maybe displace the Norwegian. That's going to be certainly something I'm going to think about until the deadline. And in terms of my bench, I've got Ward, Ivan Toney first sub, Andreas Pereira and Cucurella, who has got clean sheets in his last 2 games, and he's always been third on my bench. But that settles it. That's my 11 for double Game Week 23. I also want to show you how I would line up in Game Week 24 and Game Week 25 with my current transfer plans in future game weeks using FPL.team. In Game Week 24, I would roll the transfer and go for a 3-4-3 formation with Kepa Arrizabalaga in goal, Kieran Trippier, Ben White, Luke Shaw as the back three, Martinelli, Odegaard, Rashford and Mahrez as the midfield, and then Ivan Toney, Kane and Haaland up front. And my bench would be Ward, Cucurella, Botman and Andreas Pereira. I think that looks fairly solid. I'd be quite happy to roll the transfer unless something happens like an emergency and there's an injury that I need to deal with. Then in Game Week 25, I'd be looking to make 2 free transfers potentially and bringing in defenders. So Kepa would be in goal, Ben White once again with a double game week in 25, and then bringing in Tarkowski and a Wolves defender like Kilman who also double alongside Cucurella, who would stay in my team for now. And the 2 defenders I would get rid of are Luke Shaw and Botman, who blank in Game Week 25. Then in the following week in 26 or even in 27, I could then bring one of those players back in, a Newcastle or Man United defender in for Cucurella. So I think that's the way I'd be working it out. And I'm also looking at the likes of Badiashile from Chelsea and a Spurs defender like Pedro Porro, who I think could be a really good option until the end of the season. And if not, I'm also considering Eric Dyer, maybe someone like Perisic as well. The midfield 4 would be Andreas Pereira, Martinelli, Odegaard and Mahrez, then Kane and Haaland up front once again. And I would probably captain an Arsenal player, and I'm looking to go for Odegaard. Once again, my biggest fear and the one player I think I could miss out on in Game Weeks 23 and 25 is Bukayo Saka, but I'm still quite happy with my team structure. I would have a full 11 out in Game Week 25, and this is without taking any hits, remember, so things would look very, very solid in this case. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. What are you planning to do for Game Weeks 23, 24 and 25? And thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe for new. Let's get this video to over 300 likes. Let's also push on towards 18,000 subscribers. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check the links in the description below for the Patreon, channel memberships, FPL League, and Discord server. All of that is there. I wish you all the best of luck for double Game Week 23 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.